let's get started. This is usually a tough thing for everybody that's been out of school for more than about 3 months. Okay? So I'm just gonna get it out of the way and say that up front.
About 50 years.
The first thing we need to do is to review how to go from a decimal to a fraction to a percent. And the key to remembering this, and I have never had a student tell me that it didn't work for them, say your ABCs. Because A, B, C, D is for decimal. E, F is for fraction. And then GHI all the way up to LMNOP is percent. And the way that this works is if you're going from a percentage to a fraction, percentage means per 100, so you're going to divide by 100. But what happens every time that you do that is you move the decimal from where it starts out being 2 places to the left. Okay? So that means, for example, to convert 23%, you take the 23, skip the percent, and replace it with a temporary decimal. Move it 2 places to the left, and that means that's where the decimal goes. Okay? You trade out the percent sign with a decimal, then you move the decimal 2 places to the left. Because P comes after D, you have to go back 2 places to get to decimal. Okay? So if you have 6%, you replace your initial percentage sign with the decimal. And then you move 2 places, again, to the left. But if you move 2 places to the left, that means you'll have to put in a 0. So if you're missing a number, put a 0 between the decimal and the number. If you only have 2 numbers, you're good to go. But if you have only 1 number, you're going to need to put a 0 in front of that number. Okay? Same thing for 14.5%. That decimal is already there. You don't need to put it in. But you still move 2 places to the left. So 14.5% is 0.145. 6% is 0.06, and you can always put a 0 in front of your decimal. It doesn't change anything. And 23% is 0.23. I try to get in the habit of always putting my 0 in front of the decimal, because if I put my 0 in front of the decimal, I'm not used to a number starting out with 0, and that tells me there's probably a decimal point down there in case I didn't make it big enough. So it keeps me from reading over it. Okay? Our next is to convert from a percentage to a fraction. And again, if you're going from percentage to fraction, you put the percent over 100. So 20% is 20 over 100, which is the same thing as 20 divided by 100. And I am perfectly fine with it for you to use your calculator to make these conversions. $20 divided by 100 on your calculator, but so that it will put it in reduced form, because I'm not going to teach you how to reduce fractions to lowest terms. You have a perfectly good tool here that's going to do that for you. 20 divided by 100, press your math key. And the very first thing it says is change the answer to a fraction. So you hit enter. You choose that one. And it changes it to the correct fraction, which is 1/5. Mm-hmm.
Okay, on that first, go back up to the very first problem, it says convert a percentage to a fraction. Did we give a percentage to decimal on the fraction?
I'm sorry, I misread the instructions. My bad. Sorry.
I'm bad at math, so I was going to ask. And then the second one, we're doing to a decimal and not a fraction, right?
Yeah, I crossed them up. I'm sorry.
That's fine, I mean, it shows how to do it either way, but
Yeah.
okay, we're good.
Okay, percentage to decimal. Let me go back over the first page again. Sorry, guys. Percentage to a fraction is you take the percent divided by 100, and then you press the math button, and you choose number 1, which is FRAC for fraction, and then you hit enter, and then enter a second time. So 23% is 23 over 100. It didn't reduce. And then 6% is going to be 6 over 100. But when you put in the 6 divided by 100, and you ask it to change that into a completely reduced fraction, it tells you that's 3 over 50. And you do the same thing with 14.5%. 14.5 divided by 100, and then math, and choose the very first one, and hit enter, and it says that's 29 over 200. It's 14.5 over 100, but in order for you not to have a decimal and be totally in a fraction, not fractions mixed up with decimals, then what it actually did was it multiplied 2 times the top and the bottom, so that you would have whole numbers in both. Okay? So again, if you wanna make sure you've got the instructions, it's always percent, whatever the percent number is, divided by 100, because per cent, cent stands for century, centennial, 1 cent, which is 100 cents in a dollar. So those are all words for 100, and if it's per 100, you're dividing by 100. So percent divided by 100, then press your math key on your calculator and choose number 1, fraction, and hit the enter key. Okay?
If we need a calculator, do we go to the bookstore for that?
You go to the business office in the front, and you pay your $25 rental, and then they'll give you a receipt to take, a voucher to take to the library, and they check it out from the library to you. And then you just turn it in at the end of the semester. Now, as long as you're in here, you won't necessarily have access to this on the test, but as long as you're in here, the calculator that I'm using is actually on your desktop. It's that icon right there. It looks like a little calculator. You barely see it because of the way the screen is, but it should be about here. If it won't open when you double click it, all you need to do is right click and go to Properties and click the Compatibility tab, and just make sure that box is checked where it says Compatibility Mode, and then apply it. And if anybody needs help with getting the calculator to work on your PC, I'll be glad to help you with that.
So this is something that we can put on our own PC?
Yes, you can. You'll have to Google it to find it, because Texas Instruments is not really crazy about the fact that it's out there, and they don't get any money for it. And if you're using your iPad, now there is a graphing calculator app for your iPad. It doesn't work exactly like this, but it's pretty close.
Okay.
And I'll send you a picture of the link for the iPad version. It's not free. I think it's $7, $10, something like that. But it's a fully functional calculator.
Okay.
Okay, now that I've confused you about fractions and decimals, let's go back and try this again. If you're going from a percent to the decimal, you know D comes before P, so that's why you're going to go 2 places. So what you do is, if you have 20%, that's 20. Replace the decimal and drop the percent sign. Move 2 places left, and it becomes 0.20. And I did put my 0 in front. So that's percent to decimal. %2 is 2, and there's the decimal. But since I have to move it 2 places, 1, 2, I have to put that 0 in there. So that's 0.02. Don't get these two mixed up. 2% is just a little bit. It's 2 out of 100. 20% is much more than that. And again, 6.3%, you have your decimal, so just drop your percent. But since you have to move it 2 places to the left, you're going to have to put in that 0. Okay? Same thing with 128%. 128. The decimal's understood to be right there at the end of the number. Leave off the percent, move that decimal 1, 2 places, which means it's going to be between the 1 and the 2. So it'll be 1.28. Okay? Any questions so far? On this one, we're going, on the third set of examples, we're going from decimal to percent. Decimal comes first. And in order to get to percent, you're going to go decimal 1, 2 to change it to percent. So you're going to go to the right. And then you add percent. So, for example, 45 as a decimal, 0.45 is 45 over 100, but it is, start your decimal where it is and go 1, 2. So 0.45 is equal to 45. Then you have to swap your percent back out for your decimal. Okay? 0.03. You're going to start with where it is, 1, 2. So that's going to be 3 with the decimal after it. Now I don't need the zeros in front anymore, so I can leave those out. And replace your percent sign, your decimal with a percent sign. If you start out with a number that's doesn't really look like a decimal, put your decimal after it, and you're still going to move it 2 places, which means you're going to need to add a couple of zeros. So 2 is equal to 200, because you moved it from there over to the end, and then drop the decimal and change it to percent. If it's 0.063, again, you're going to move it 2 places, which means your decimal is going to go between your 6 and your 3. And because the decimal is between 2 numbers, you don't drop it out this time. You keep it because it's between, it's not at the end. And you add your percent sign. Okay? Any questions so far? Now, I recorded this, so you're going to be able to go back to it. Now, fraction to a percent, we're not going to use any memory tricks. We're going to use a graphing calculator because it knows how to do this, and it does it for us really nicely. To convert from a fraction to a percent, you take your fraction, and it's top divided by bottom. The fancy math words are numerator divided by denominator. Top divided by bottom. And just hit enter. Okay? So 1/4. 1 divided by 4 and it changed it to a decimal. Now, if I have a decimal and I want to change it to a percent, okay, let me come help you. Remember, if I'm wanting to go fraction to percent, I'm gonna have to first go to a decimal, then to a percent. So that's going to be 0.2512 equals 25%.
She got it, she didn't have it turned on.
Okay, yeah. It goes off, it thinks it's saving the battery, even though it's a computer program. Okay? So 3/8. 3 divided by 8, enter. And you get 0.375. But that's a decimal. You want to go to a percent. 1, 2. And again, because your decimal is between two numbers still, you don't throw it away, but you add a percent sign onto the end. Now our next one is 5 divided by 9. Hit enter, and now we have a problem, because it's a repeating decimal, okay? It's called a repeating decimal. And those 5s go on, so you can write it that way. Or you can write 0.5 with a bar over it, which also indicates that it repeats. But remember, we don't want a decimal anyway. We want a percent. So we're going to go 1, 2, which means it's going to be 55 point. Now that 5 is going to keep on going. The rounding rule for decimals is if it's 0.5 or higher, you go up to the next number, which would be 6. If it's less than 0.5, 0, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, you just leave that number. But since ours is going 0, it's going 55.555, then our answer is going to be 55.6%, and that's rounded to the nearest tenth of a percent. So that's how you round off, okay? And it's okay to keep doing this, but really, realistically, that's what we're going to have to use. That's actually called an approximation.
So remove the decimal before and round it up, right?
Yes, move the decimal exactly like you did before, and then look at the number after the decimal. If it's 5 or higher, go up 1. If it's less than 5, keep it the same as it is or erase the rest of them. And you would do that even if it wasn't a repeating decimal, if it was just a big, long, huge decimal. Like, for example, it wouldn't be common to have this kind of problem, but I'll just make one up. So if you were to get something like that, you would have 0.44067 And they keep on going, but there's no discernible pattern that we can see. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go 1, 2, and that's gonna be 44.067. And since we're only looking at the number after the decimal, we're just gonna go ahead and call that 44.0%. Or if you wanted to, you could call it 44.07% because 7 comes after the 6. So you'd round it up. Okay? Now, I'm not likely to ask you one like this because those kind of things don't happen very often in real life. Now, next page. A ratio is a fraction. Which means it can also be expressed as a decimal or percent because fractions and decimals and percents are all ways of explaining quantities. The way a ratio works is if A is equal to 10 and B is equal to 2, then the ratio of A to B is A over B. And since A is 10 and B is 2, that's 10 over 2. Which is equal to 5. Okay? That's actually a decimal. So it would also be equal to 5. Oh, sorry, thank you. Always say that for me. You move it over to the end, so it's 5, but it's the same as 500%. So you can express ratios as decimals, fractions, or percents as well. The ratio of B to A is B over A. Just remember that what comes first is on top and what comes second is on the bottom. So B is 2, A is 10, and that's 0.2. And if you want to change it to a percentage, it's 20%. We do use proportions quite a bit in realistic problems. So in our next example, it says A is what percent of B? What you're doing is you're changing the ratio of A to B into a percent. So A to B is 500%. A is 500% of B. B, on the other hand, is 20% of A. Because again, you do the ratio B over A, get a decimal and change the decimal to a percent. Okay? Now we're gonna talk about equation review, and I'm gonna give you some time to practice before we leave. When you're solving equations, you have some number minus 10 left you with 6. So the question you're being asked here is, what is z? What did you have to start with that after you took 10 away from it, you wound up with only 6? It would have been 16. So if you think through it, you know the answer should be 16. Now, the algebraic way to do this is, since this is the number we're trying to find, we want to get it by itself. And in order to move this 10 to the other side, we're going to change the sign of it to plus, and we're going to add it to both sides of the equal. And the reason you do that is because if you got things in balance, which is what an equals means, it's like the seesaw is balanced. If you put something on this side, you have to put the same amount on the other side. Okay? So minus 10 plus 10 gets rid of the 10 on that side, because subtracting 10 and adding 10 leaves you with just z. And then 6 plus 10 is equal to 16. And I would suggest that you always check yourself. Does 16 minus 10 equal 6? And it does. So you always want to verify that your answer that you came up with actually works back in the original problem. This time we have a number 5 in front of the z. That means z has been multiplied by 5. The way that you do your order of operations here is that you first have to get 5z by itself. Okay? So you want to do the same thing we did here. We want to add 1 to get rid of the subtract 1. So we're going to add 1 on the other side. That gets rid of it here, and that leaves us with 5 times z equals 19 plus 1 is 20. So that tells us that 5 times some number is equal to 20. And we need to figure out what that number is. Notice how I did opposite signs here? If it was subtract, I add. If it's subtract, I add. If it's multiplied, I divide. That'll take away the 5 on that side. And that means z is 20 over 5. But 20 over 5 is what we call an improper fraction. So we'll get the calculator and say 20 divided by 5 is 4. And then again, just to be sure you did it right, you're going to check. Does 5 times 4 subtract 1 equal 19? And remember your order of operations. Multiply and divide comes before add and subtract. So 5 times 4 is 20 minus 1. Is that equal to 19? And it is. Okay? Now, this is, again, a little bit more complicated because we have one more step to do. This time, we're gonna need to, what we call combine like terms, which means we wanna put together the things that have S's. And the way that you do that is you say you have subtract 4 and subtract 6, minus 4 minus 6. And if you're a little rusty, it's okay to do this. Your negative sign is next to enter on the calculator. Negative 4 subtract 6 is negative 10. So you combined your S terms. Okay, there's that part. And then the rest of it, you just bring it right on down. 5 minus 10s equals negative 5. Is this 5 positive or negative? Okay, so if I wanted to get rid of it, I want to add its opposite, which is negative. So that means now I have negative 10s equals negative 5 plus negative 5 is negative 10. And now this is negative 10 times s. It's multiplying. The opposite of multiply is divide. So I'll divide both sides by negative 10. That means I'll have just s left by itself on this side. And then negative 10 over negative 10 is going to be 1 because anything over itself is 1. And you still want to check. 5 minus 4 times 1 minus 6 times 1 is equal to, we hope, negative 5. That's 5 minus 4 minus 6 equals negative 5. Now 5 minus 4 minus 6 is in fact equal to negative 5. Okay? This one is sort of the same thing, except this time our two x terms are on opposite sides. And we need to move them to the same side so we can get them together and by themselves. So you can do either way you want to, but usually I like for all of my variable, my letter terms, I like for them to come before the equal sign. So since this is a positive 2x, I'm going to add a negative 2x to both sides, which means then that this will take that away and move it to the other side. And 3x minus 2x leaves me with 1x minus 4 and leaves the 6 over there where it was. And then since this 4 is subtracted from x, I'm going to add 4 to both sides. And 6 plus 4 is 10. And you can write the 1x, I don't care if you write the 1x, or you can just simply call it x equals 10. The 1 is understood to be there. You don't really need it, so you can leave it out if you want to. It's just saying 1 times x. Okay? And again, you still want to check if x is 10, 3 times 10 minus 4, is that equal to 2 times 10 plus 6? Let's see, 3 times 10, subtract 4, is equal to 26. And 2 times 10, add 6, is equal to 26. So my answer checks. Now these were all things that you should have seen before. It shouldn't have any of it been new, but it's been a while. And you may not have done it a long time, so you need to practice. Now I've recorded this. I'm going to post this recording in Shobi. It'll be on the Unit 0 review, and it'll be a link. And in Shobi you can just click the link and it will take you to this recording. Okay? Now it's like 1 minute till, so anybody that needs to leave can go ahead and go. But your remaining homework, let me bring that back up again. Your remaining homework is the rest of that handout. I want you to complete this table, which means you're given a fraction, change it to a decimal, and then change it to a percent. You're given a decimal, change it into a fraction, completely reduced, use your calculator, change it into a percent. So fill out this table. And actually, box for 6 is continued on the next page because I blew mine up. Yours should be all in one piece. And then this is practice on finding the ratio of A to B. And this is practice for solving the equations. Be sure and show all your steps. You can do these on paper. Now, you can also do them in Shobi. It's up to you. Do it whichever way you're the most comfortable. But what I want you to do is I want you to either do it on Shobi with a stylus and fill it in there and submit it into Shobi, or take your papers that you printed out, finish them on your paper, then get your phone, take a picture of each paper, each sheet, save them onto a flash drive, save them somewhere, save them into your photos. Once you've got those pictures, go to Shobi and go into your folder. And at the top, now this shared folder is my folder, okay? You'll have a folder that has your own name on it. When you're ready to submit this, what you do is you click this plus sign, because that's the way it looks on a computer for you too. And then you're going to add from your computer or from your storage drive, whatever you, if you're using that particular storage drive, it lets you use Dropbox or iCloud or whatever you use for online storage. But you're going to add the picture, and then you'll have to go find your picture. Now yours is going to be the picture of the paper that you did, but I'm going to put one in there just so you'll see how this works. So I'm going to pick that picture open it, and tell it to post it. So then it pops up in your box. I can open it up and look at it. I can make a comment on it. Pretty flower. You'll be able to see my comment. I can put a text box on it. Tell you to show your work. Or if I want to explain something to you about the flower, I can actually make a little voice recording and talk to you. So if you've got a question on one, you can ask me the question with that little voice thing on whatever you're working on, and then I will answer you back. Okay? You need to have the rest of this practice done before I see you next time. I did not take the roll today. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. That means a couple people are not here. Be sure that you send me that text and remind, because that's how I'm going to check the roll thing. Okay?
I'm sorry, what text or just send, just to me?
Remind. Did you sign up for the remind yet?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Just go into remind and send me a message in remind. You just type it in. You say, I was here today.
I think it was what she gave us.
This is what she gave it.
If it's a other variable,
It was just, okay, first put math into an F, and then
I just searched Northeast, and then after that, it'll ask like the teacher. I didn't do a code where it has like search for the college. I just searched Northeast State and the Blockville one, and then you can just
as
search
long as
the
you've got an
teacher.
iPad or an iPhone or a laptop, there is no textbook for this class.
So we're gonna get the e-book done today.
I don't think you really need to know. I'm gonna double check with Miss Dagny, but I don't think she's requiring you to anymore, because she wrote all of the lessons, and the lessons take the placement book, so I don't think you need to. Okay? If anybody needs anything, I'm gonna hang out till about 15 after.
Trying to get him up on remind here.
you need to
Okay.
tell